Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I know some of you are or have already started this assignment. However, I did want to go through it with you because I feel like we're not meeting together, so you need to hear my voice occasionally. So, this is for the regions of the 13 colonies. If you've seen this, you already know that it is a fill in the blank. So the first one we're looking at is New England. So when we look at New England, what they do for a living and the type of environment we're in. So you've got lots of lumber, you've got fishing, shipping, and whaling. These are the things they're going to do for a living. You're going to have some farming, but this is going to be limited. So these people have long winters, and that means that it's cold a lot of the year, and short growing seasons, which means that whatever they grow has to be something that can be grown in a short amount of time. They also have rocky soil, which makes a lot of things difficult to farm in this region. For example, you won't grow things like cotton, tobacco, nothing like that. You're going to grow things that you can have immediately, like tomatoes, broccoli, cauliflower, lettuce, cabbage. Those are going to be the types of things that you grow. This is called subsistence farming. And this means that you're growing enough to feed your family for the year, but you're not growing enough to sell large quantities to the market. You're selling the little bit of extra that you have, or you're trading it in town. In New England, you have what are known as townships. Most New Englanders live in or around a town. Farms were also situated around the outskirts of the town, so you're never too far away from the town that you're part of. Slavery is very limited. There are very few slaves, and it will die out rather quickly in New England because they are unnecessary, and many of the New Englanders don't agree with the practice. The New England economy includes fishing, whaling, timber, shipbuilding, and overseas trade, and eventually smuggling. We'll talk about it as we get into mercantilism a little later. The middle colonies, this section that is in the middle of the whole 13, think of this as being the middle of everything. It's the middle temperatures, it's the middle soil, so it's not as rich as it is in the South, but it's not poor like it is in New England. Their summers or their warm season is a little longer in the middle colonies because it's a little warmer. It's not as warm as the southern colonies, but it's not as cold as the New England colonies. So everything about it is in the middle. Now, they're going to be selling furs. They're going to be growing wheat, barley, oats, corn, anything you can make bread out of. And of course, they're going to be mining for iron. The middle colony's climate, short winters, fertile soil, allows for the production of cash crops. A cash crop is a crop grown by a farmer to be sold for money rather than for personal use. Now, this isn't to say they don't use some of their crops for themselves, but the majority of what they have, they're going to sell. So they're going to have large farms of corn. They're going to have large farms that have wheat, and they're going to take those, they're going to harvest them, and they're going to sell them to other people. They have what are called grist mills. Grist mills is where they crush the grain between heavy stones to produce flour or meal, like cornmeal. And this is essentially what you're going to use to make your bread. The middle colonies have large cities that will develop around natural harbors, specifically Philadelphia and New York. These are excellent ports that will lead to large groups of immigrants moving to this area. It will make the middle colonies the most diverse. This means different. So when we have on your assignment cultural diversity, it's talking about different cultures coming together. You'll have German, Dutch, Jewish, they'll even allow Catholics. And they'll practice what is known as religious tolerance. And what this means is that they will allow and tolerate other religions and not pick on people because they happen to be different. Specifically, we're going to focus on the Quakers because they will be located in the middle colonies in Pennsylvania, and there'll be a large group that will contribute to the land. The middle colonies will have artisans. These are craftspeople such as iron workers, makers of glass, furniture, and kitchenware. The Conestoga wagons, which are wide-wheeled wagons suitable for dirt roads with curved beds that prevented spilling when climbing up or down hills. The middle colonies will have some slavery, but it's going to die out quickly. And one of the reasons it dies out is because the Quakers are pacifists. And what that means is that they do not believe in violence. And for the Quakers, slavery is violent. And they will go out of their way to avoid slavery, to stop slavery in their towns. And ultimately, they will be the leaders in the Underground Railroad to help slaves escape the institution. In the middle colonies, their economy is going to be based off of barley or grains. They will become known as the bread basket of the colonies. And that essentially means anything you can make bread out of, they're going to grow it. Wheat, oats, barley, rye, corn. We've got cornbread, you've got regular bread, you have oat bread, you have barley bread. If you go to the store and your parents buy the bread that has the 5 different grains, there they are. They'll also grow some fruits and vegetables. And of course, they're going to hunt for fur because they have plenty of untouched land, which means that the killing of the animals hasn't happened yet. And so they're going to sell fur. They're going to mine for iron, and they'll have livestock such as pigs, sheep, and cattle. In this area, they're also going to have dairy farms. And the dairy farms will produce, of course, milk for the surrounding area, especially for those families who can't afford to have their own cows. And then that leads us to the southern colonies. The southern colonies, the warmer part of the United States, just think of it in terms of Houston. The southern colonies has the same type of landscape, the same type of weather and climate, the same type of geography. It's going to be very warm. They'll have long growing seasons. And as you can see from the picture, they're going to be very rich. Of course, that's not everybody in the South, but it is the plantation owners. So the southern colonies have a warm climate. It is almost year-round growing because think about Houston. It only gets cold for a couple of months out of the year. The rest of the time, it's moderately warm to hot. They have excellent soil that is ideal for growing valuable cash crops. They are primarily a rural environment with few large cities. This means that they don't have these big urban environments or cities. They have farms that are far apart from each other. Nothing is close by. Your neighbor may be 5 miles away. They have the plantation economy. First and foremost, a plantation is a large farm. So if I'm talking about a plantation, I'm referring to a very large farm with hundreds of acres. Their plantation economy is primarily agricultural, meaning that it's farming, with massive cash crop producing farms. Massive cash crop producers. This means the tobacco and the cotton would be fields that you could see as far as your eye could see. You have the planter class, which is a group of an elite, wealthy plantation owning men. They have large pockets, meaning there's lots of money. And because they have lots of money, they also run the government. So the southern colonies are not going to be run by the people. They're going to be run by the planter class, the guys with the money. The southern colonies will depend on slave labor. And the reason for this is because the crops grown in the South are called labor-intensive crops, which means that they require a lot of work and a lot of people to work them. So slave labor will become very common and widespread throughout the colonies because they need more people than they can get. So they're going to purchase them. You'll have what we know of as overseers, and these are the men who are hired by the planters to watch over and direct the work of the slaves. Essentially, these are going to be the men in charge of the slaves while they work in the field because the owners are not always present. The southern colonies are going to depend on tobacco, indigo, rice, tar, cattle, and deerskin. Now, I want to point a couple of things out. So these are tobacco plants. Now, the biggest concern for tobacco plants is there is a bug, I believe it's called a boll weevil, that starts out very tiny. But once they infest your tobacco, they get very big very rapidly. So they might start out at about an inch long, but if they've had time, they will grow to a good 6 inches if they have time to eat your tobacco. So this is one of the reasons that tobacco is labor intensive. It required slaves to go through the plants and make sure that these little bugs weren't on them. What you have here in the right-hand corner, this is indigo. Indigo is a beautiful small plant that makes the color royal blue. There's a reason it's called royal blue, because the only people who could afford that color or the dye, which comes from this plant, was royalty. So the indigo took a very specific environment to grow in, and the South was ideal from it. And the plant is very temperamental. So if it gets slightly cold or slightly hot, it will kill the plant. So the Virginian colonies and the Carolinas were ideal for growing indigo. And what you see below the indigo down here, this is rice. The rice, of course, has to grow underwater, and the South is ideal for this because it has a lot of marshy areas where there's a lot of water, and it works for this, and it's warm enough to grow it. And then, of course, tar, which they'll use to thatch roofs, meaning that they'll put them on the roof to keep water out. You, of course, have cattle and deer skin that they will sell for profit. So these are the 13 colonies. And if you've completed your map like you were supposed to, then you would know the purple here is New England. You have the middle colonies is yellow. And then you have the southern colonies, which are orange. And this is a standard home, especially in the, I believe it was New Jersey that had the first ones made by the Swedish. The last one is backcountry. Now, just so we know, backcountry, this is the front. Here are the Appalachian Mountains. Backcountry is where this line is. Now, these people are near the Appalachian Mountains. They are... they're a little further back. So these are going to be your people that are hunting for animals. They will sell furs for money. They're going to trade with the Indians. They're going to build log cabins. They have a very independent way of life. So they're not going to follow the same rules as those people that are living in the country closest to the coastline. They have the fall line. This is where waterfalls prevent large boats from moving further upriver. So in these sections, the boats will only go so far, and then you have to do the trek on foot. Beyond the fall line means foot of the mountain, which is a broad plateau that leads to the Blue Ridge Mountains, and that's where you have to get out of the boat and you got to walk. These are small farms. These are not going to be plantations. As I said, they'll trade with the Indians. They'll live in log cabins. They will follow their own way of life, their political life. They won't follow the same rules as those that live in the larger areas. And they have what are known as self-sustaining farms, kind of like subsistence farming. They're going to have a few crops. They're going to have livestock. They'll do hunting. They'll do fishing, all to sustain their way of life. They're not going to be rich. They're not going to make money. A little different from the plantation owners that are living in the South alongside them. The backcountry were people who had a desire for land. And these were individuals who usually couldn't afford to live in the front area closest to the coastline. So they would move to this back section. The settlers tended to be Presbyterian. There are a large number of Scots-Irish immigrants who live in clans. This means large groups of families that come over together. And if they don't come over together, you'll have a small group that comes first. They settle the land, and then the rest of the family will follow through. As you can see from the fill in the blank, it's large groups of families, sometimes thousands, that claim a common ancestor. Clans were very suspicious of outsiders. You'll still see many of these in the Appalachian Mountains even today in 2020. They haven't disappeared. So here are our colonies. You've got the New England colonies in purple, our middle colonies in yellow, and our southern colonies in orange. And the back country is going to be near the Appalachian Mountains and beyond. All right, guys, this should help you when you're filling out the middle colonies and southern colonies assignments and handouts that I sent home. Keeping in mind, you work on the middle colonies tomorrow. If you have any questions about them, I will answer them. One of the items on, let me pull it up for your, for your middle colony section, which you will get later, was what is cultural diversity? And when we talk about cultural diversity, we're looking at the different cultures in your area. So for the middle colonies, as I said when we did the notes, it is the largest culturally different group. That's what cultural diversity means. And that's located right here on your handout. So this just means lots of different cultures all together. And as you go through the reading, you're just going to fill in what area did the Dutch settle? Where did the Duke of York settle? The same for Lord Berkeley and Carteret. Where did William Penn settle, as well as the Quakers? What is the proprietary colony and promises made to attract colonists to the environment? And when you get to this section, I've already answered it with the notes for some of them. For others, you'll have to look on the map in Chapter 4, Lesson 3. And you'll do the same when you get to the southern colonies. You'll look on Chapter 4, Lesson 4. And as usual, if you have any questions, please send me an email.